Hello, everyone, and here we have a news story. Before we get to that, I want to ask you to subscribe, like, and be sure to write comments in order to participate in the development of the community. Write how to improve my community, current topics and the stories you are interested in, and much more. I read and listen to all the comments. I want to thank everyone for their support and the people who wrote to me by mail, broadcasting news stories. Don't forget to put a bell in order not to miss new videos. And now let's go. My mother was 16 years old when she met my father. He was 4 years older than her. They had a very strong love, and as often happens, she got pregnant. They moved and began to live together so as not to depend on their parents, rented an apartment. I was born when my mother was 17 years old. It is difficult to combine studies with a child, so my father studied and worked wherever possible. My father did everything he could to make my mother's life easier. He washed, cleaned, cooked, even ran for medicines when I was sick. In general, did everything that a loving husband and father should do. When I grew up, my mother entered the institute at the Faculty of Medicine. I was sent to live with my grandmother, my mother's mother. The medical institute was in another city. Because of this, I very rarely saw my mother. When she was on vacation, her arrival was a holiday for me. It is simply impossible to describe in words how happy I was. I remember well how we spent time with the whole family. When my mother was at home, I was allowed to watch TV late. One thing was bad, her vacation flew by so quickly and the gray days covered my life again. My dad supported me as much as he could, took me to his place for the weekend, taught me to skate, played baseball with him, and much more. My father took me to elementary school. I still remember how we went to meet my mom when she came on vacation. The train arrived late. Dad put me on his shoulders, and we walked along a dark road lit by lanterns. Mom graduated from college when I was already in the second grade. She got a job in our city. At that time, my father took a 2-room apartment on credit in general. Nothing could interfere with our happy family life. It is worth saying that my mother in her youth was a very beautiful girl. Slender figure, blonde, blue eyes the color of the sky. I was not surprised that my father lost his head after the first meeting with her. When Mom was over 40, she looked like a young girl. When I walked down the street with her, everyone thought we were a couple, not mother and son. After school, I studied to be a pilot. I was lucky and I was hired by a good company, Delta Airlines. Our plane made many flights. I visited London, Paris, and not only. I was rarely at home, but when I returned, I was greeted by my father and mother. And now my term of work has come to an end. I bought presents and headed home. This time I was standing at the airport and my parents weren't there. It looks like they are delayed, but I was not upset and headed for the exit thinking to call myself a taxi. Already on the way out, someone called out to me. The voice was very familiar. Turning around, I saw my mother getting out of a luxury car. Wow, I thought, they just won the lottery. But the mother was alone. She did not answer the question. Where is Dad? She just said to get in the car. There are many changes in this life. We will talk on the way. I was sitting in the back seat next to my mom. The driver and the young man were sitting in front. As soon as the door slammed shut, the man turned around and asked, "Where are we going?" The mother calmly replied home and smiled. I looked at her in confusion. She immediately started saying that she had already left my father and they had not been together for 6 months. "I'm living with a loved one now. I just didn't want to tell you while you were working so you wouldn't worry," she said. "My new husband's name is Liam. This is my first and only love. Fate separated us, but 2 years ago we met again." It was obvious that she was worried. Her face was flushed and her eyes were shining excitedly. But that's not all. Mom told me that this is not my real father, but Liam is my real father. When Mom got pregnant, his parents put pressure on him and he had to leave, and my mother married another man. But all these years she had loved Liam and thought only of him. All the way Mom told me something else. But I was driving in the car, not believing my ears, and I didn't hear her at all. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat and my ears were ringing. I asked, "Where is my father now? I mean, is Kyle my first father?" Mom shrugged nervously and assumed that he was in our old apartment. "He's completely out of his mind playing soldiers," she said. I heard the contempt in her voice. "Where are we going now?" I asked. "My own son. We live outside the city in a cottage village. We have a 3-story house. Liam is your real father, a big businessman. We have prepared a room for you." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. Finally, we arrived at this huge mansion surrounded by trees. On the threshold, we were met by an elderly man. As it turned out, this is Liam, presumably my real father. Just didn't fit in my head. Mom came out and happily kissed him. "Liam is your son," she said. "Well, hello, son," he muttered and held out his hand to me. I greeted him in silence. His palm was somehow sluggish and wet. "Come in, this is your house," he said, and waved his hand, ostensibly inviting me inside. I stood there and thought about Kyle, the father I've known all my life. And finally, I started saying that I still have things to do. I have to stop by the airline's office. I took a gift out of my bag. It was a box of cosmetics and handed it to her. "Oh, thank you, son," she said, and shook her hair, as if in an advertisement. Looking at her, I understood everything. That now she doesn't need this cosmetics. Her new husband can afford to buy her a whole perfume shop. But for the sake of decency, she feigned joy. "Stay, eat, take a shower, rest, and then leave," she said. "Work comes first," I said grimly. "Let him go. First of all, he needs to solve his work issues," Liam said and grinned. "We'll be waiting for you. In the meantime, take my car. The driver will take you where you need to go." "No thanks, I prefer a taxi anyway," I replied. I kissed my mom, turned around, walked out of the yard onto the road and called a taxi. It wasn't until I was riding in a taxi that I fully realized what had happened. My mother lived with my father for 27 years. There were never quarrels. Everything was always smooth. It always seemed to me that they loved each other. But as soon as this Liam appeared, my mother left my father without hesitation and rushed to him for her happiness. And she's trying to drag me away with her. But what about the ex-husband? He helped raise someone else's child, and now you can be free. What misunderstanding? Rage seized my thoughts. She made a decision, and now I have to throw myself into the arms of a new dad? The father is not the one who conceived, but the one who raised, I thought. I was just imagining how Kyle felt as a father. When his mother abandoned him and announced that his son was not from him, I was heading to my dad's old apartment, and I didn't care if he was my dad or not. I was on my way to my father, who I had always loved. I opened the apartment doors with my key. When I entered the apartment, I saw that it was quiet there. I went to my room and threw my bag on the sofa. Nothing has changed. Everything is in its place, as in childhood. My father was not at home, probably at the store or at work. Then the front door creaked. Turning around, I saw a neighbor come in. "Your father is not at home. He had a heart attack and an ambulance took him away yesterday." The hospital was not far from home, so I went there on foot. On the way to the hospital, I bought fruit and juice. With these words, I entered the ward. "Hi, Dad. Instead of meeting your son, you hide in hospitals." My father turned his head. His eyes looked at me in surprise. "I greet you with your arrival," I heard in response. You see, Chet fell apart. "I'm really sorry I didn't meet you." "Come on, Dad, don't worry about it," I replied with a smile. "I've come for a long time, and now I will work on domestic airlines. So we'll see each other more often. I have a surprise for you, but I'll give it to you at home. When will you be discharged?" "I don't know, son. They're not saying anything yet." "I think I will stay here for another 2 weeks," my father calmly replied. "Okay, Dad, get well, and when you're discharged, we'll go buy a cottage. Do you remember that you wanted to have a house in nature?" The father said nothing and looked away. I sat with my father for a while, trying to talk about abstract topics, then said goodbye and went to look for a doctor. The doctor calmed me down and said there was nothing serious about it. It was just that my father was very nervous. With proper care, everything can be repaired. I came up with an idea. I was in a hurry to do a paternity test. I needed a certificate or a conclusion that this is my real father. The phone rang sharply. My mother called me. I dropped the call. I was familiar with the medical examiner, dialed his number, and made an appointment. At the meeting, I said that I wanted to conduct a test, but in order not to surprise him, I said that I already know the result, and I needed a certificate or a conclusion. My classmate was nervously smoking with the words, "This is not legal." I've outlined the whole situation in general terms. Don't be afraid. Only my father will see it. "Help me," I said plaintively. The classmate stood up with the words, "So first bring me the biomaterial. It's best if it's your father's hair. And we need your samples. Bring them to our laboratory. I'll be waiting for you at 4 o'clock. The answer will be given the next day in the late afternoon. Just for the sake of our friendship, I will give you 2 conclusions, one real, the second fake, and you will decide what to do with them," he said. Going outside, I dialed my mother's number and listened to her lamentations for a long time. Then, I tried to calm her down and told her that I would spend the night in our old apartment. The next day, at the appointed time, I visited a classmate. When I entered his office, there was one paper on his desk. I looked at him with disbelief. "Something didn't work?" I asked. "On the contrary, everything is fine," I heard in response. He handed me the conclusion. In conclusion, it was said that Kyle is my real biological father with a 99 probability. My legs gave out. What does that mean? "And this means that your father is already a real father to you in every sense," I heard in response. Half an hour later, I was glad to be in the hospital. Entering the ward, the father lay without mood. We started a dialogue during which he called me by name. I asked Dad why you call me by my first name. "Has something changed?" My father replied that he knew about my mother's new husband and that I was not his son. I grinned and asked if you could read without glasses and handed him the conclusion. He looked at the conclusion for a long time. I saw how his hands were shaking. Then he looked at me and a tear rolled down his cheek. "Well, are we going to buy a cottage or what?" I smiled. I stayed to live with my father. I didn't explain anything to my mother and I didn't blame her for anything. I just didn't see the point. At first, she tried to convince me to move in with her and her new husband. But in the end, she stopped. I didn't tell her anything about the DNA examination. She lived with the certainty that Liam was my father. Time passed and I married a girl who worked in my crew as a flight attendant. A year later, our son was born. We named him after his grandfather. I haven't talked to my mom all this time. Categorically forbade her to come to us. My father never married again, although from time to time I introduced him to different women. And then the hour came when my father died. I buried him next to his parents, as he asked. A year later, Mom's new husband, Liam, also died. Mom still lived in the cottage. She did not work and entrusted the management of the company's affairs to managers. One day, my wife insisted that we visit my mother. We were met by a well-groomed, beautiful woman. She kissed me and my wife and suddenly froze in her tracks. A tear flowed down her face. She saw her grandson. It seemed to her that her first husband, only very young, was standing in front of her. She understood everything right away. "God, what have I done?" she whispered. We sat there. My mother sobbed and drank glass after glass. To be honest, I thought she knew and was just deceiving me. What do you think, friends? If you liked my story, subscribe to the channel and write a comment. That's it. Thank you all very much. Channel Author's Advice. Whatever I say, the choice is still yours. Yes, in my opinion, you did the right thing. Did your mother lie to you? There is no exact answer to this question. And if she really thought he wasn't your father, if you look from the mother's side, she loves you. She did not want to harm you with her actions. It seems to me that there were many such situations in the world and a large number of children choose their mother. In this situation, I would also stay with my father. What do you think, friends? Write in the comments. It will be interesting for me to read your opinion myself. Engaging in open and honest communication is essential. Allow each family member to express their feelings and motives behind their actions. Often, people make choices based on their circumstances, emotions, and limited prospects at the time. This can lead to unintended consequences that they may not fully realize until they are fully aware. It is important to recognize that forgiveness does not necessarily mean condoning actions or forgetting the past. Instead, it's a way to free yourself from the emotional burden that comes with holding negative feelings. By showing empathy and understanding, you create an opportunity for healing for yourself and other participants. Remember that each person's story is complex, and their motives may be related to personal struggles and external pressure. Consider having a sincere conversation to share your point of view and get clarification on their opinion. Ultimately, a deeper understanding of everyone's experience can lead to a more harmonious and compassionate family dynamic. In conclusion, when you are guided by the consequences of revelations in your story, give priority to open communication, empathy, and willingness to forgive. These steps can contribute to a more peaceful and fulfilling journey through the complexities of family relationships. Friends, I have a dream that my channel has gained 100,000 subscribers. I know that I'm still far away, but I believe in it. If you have watched to the end, I want to say thank you very much. I love you all. Thank you for joining me on this exciting journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. I appreciate your support and encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this story. Your participation and feedback are invaluable for shaping our content and promoting mutual understanding and community growth. Until we meet again.